Now, first, we just want to talk about what has happened in the last few hours. Iran had made it clear that if Israel continued to strike Lebanon, it would strike at Israel. Now, that's happened. Israel will presumably strike back. Jeff, your thoughts?
Well, Israel wants the war against Iran to continue. The United States wants it to stop. Iran, on the whole, wants it to stop. Every time there has been something approaching a ceasefire or some kind of partial agreement, Israel has gone out of its way to try to undermine that. And I think that that's what's at play again. In the last few days, the basic discussion has been that Israel needs to stop the bombing of Beirut and more generally the invasion of Lebanon. Trump has said that Israel should do this. He said it in very Trumpian language a few days ago that I can't even repeat, but people have heard. But he called Netanyahu an effing crazy,
profanity-laced phone call.
Yes. And that's interesting. We don't know exactly how much is for show. We don't know if every other word that Trump utters anyway is profanity. But this was obviously a pushback against Israel. Yesterday, we had a lead story in the New York Times about Israel spying on the U.S., spying on the Defense Department. This was also clearly a planted story. There's a lot of anti-Israel sentiment or a lot of pressure against Israel in senior reaches of the U.S. government to tell Israel to stop the madness. I couldn't agree more with that sentiment, by the way. But here we are.
Well, on that note, Jeff, I just want to put this to you. This is actually breaking. Trump is furious, as you say. He's told Axios, I'm going to call Netanyahu right now and tell him not to retaliate against Iran. I'm not happy about Israel's attack on Beirut.
Yes, it's pretty clear that, first of all, everyone is fed up with Israel in Australia, in the United States, around the world. The big story about Israel last week was a new worldwide opinion survey carried out by Pew Research, which people can find online. And there's basically not a place in the world that isn't absolutely very unhappy with Israel's behavior. And in Australia, it runs something like 78% disapproval rating. In the United States, it's around 70% disapproval rating. All through Europe, it's generally in the high 70s disapproval rating. In the Arab world and in Turkey, it's in the 90s of disapproval rating. People are really sick of the this greater Israel project, which is that Israel's going to occupy and terrorize the Palestinian people and then go to war with anybody that opposes that. People are not convinced this is about Israel's security. They think it's about Israel's blatant grab
Jeff,
for power.
Let's put this back on Trump now, because all the onus is on him now. This is Triti Parsi, who's been a past guest on this program. Yes. I suspect you know Triti.
I know him well.
Trita says this, quote, if Trump doesn't enter the war, he will be accused of abandoning Israel. If he enters the war, he will validate that Israel has an effective veto on the negotiations and on whether the US is at war or not. Jeff?
Well, yes, it's clear to me that politically Trump should, at this point, tell Israel stop and not enter the war on behalf of Israel, because, as I was just saying, and the point that I was making is the public is absolutely against all of this. The public in the United States is against the war in Iran. It does not believe that this was for U.S. national security or the U.S. national interest. It believes it was for Israel. It does not believe it was a legitimate war, a war that was properly motivated or a war that in any way has been successful. Trump, of course, has a strong pro-Israel lobby in the United States. It's a lot of his base, in fact, especially the so-called Christian Zionists in the United States, who are the Protestant evangelicals whose mega churches preach a pro-Israel ideology for all sorts of interesting theological reasons. But in any event, that's a lot of Trump's base. It's not simple for him to resist it. But what is true is that by around 60% to 20%, the American people are saying, we don't want this war against Iran to continue. By an overwhelming majority, Americans are saying we want a state of Palestine, and we don't like what Israel is doing. We want two-state solution. This is the predominant view in the American public. Trump faces an election in November, our congressional elections. His party is overwhelmingly likely to lose the lower house of the Congress, which will tie up the rest of his term in knots.
Be the lamest of lame ducks.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's about to happen. And if Trump goes to war now, if energy prices spike, well, that would be the end of his presidency, basically.
Does escalation, Jeff, work to Iran's advantage here? And presumably it's the exact opposite for Trump. He can't afford to restart an air war, can he?
I don't think Iran wants escalation, actually.
Right.
They're in tremendous...
Compared to the status quo, if the Americans aren't budging on the negotiations, doesn't Iran then have an interest in escalation?
Right now, there is I wouldn't call it a stalemate, but there has been, up until a few hours ago, a kind of limbo in which the noose around the world economy is tightening because the energy continues not to flow. The U.S. is blockading the strait, and Iran is saying, well, if you're blockading the strait, we're also blockading the strait. It's kind of a madness. The question is, what should happen, and what are the interests of the two sides? In my view, the interests of Iran and the United States are just to call the whole thing off, for the U.S. to go home, for Iran, after that happens, to open up the strait, maybe charging a toll or something else, which is almost an irrelevancy, by the way, but basically to call this off, because the whole war was premised on a weird delusion. Trump and Netanyahu believed that they would win the war in one day, that they would kill the leadership, replace the leadership, own Iran. It was kind of a madness of two crazy people, in my view. But it failed right away. Since then, there's been no good possible coming out of this. And the only question has been, would the U.S. escalate and the Middle East would go into a complete turmoil and the whole world economy would face a major crisis? That's one option. Second, would there be a negotiated solution between the U.S. and Iran? And the third option, which is the one that I have both called for and believed most likely, is the U.S. should just go home, and de facto there would be an end of the fighting, because I don't really believe that Trump and his minions have the political capacity or the technical capacity to actually negotiate something right now. So I just want the thing to end. Now, having said all of that, Israel doesn't want it to end. Israel wants Iran to be destroyed, and the only one that can do that is the United States. And so this has been Netanyahu's dream, as he told us on the first day, for 40 years, get the U.S. into a full-fledged war against Iran. Now, today was a step in that direction for Netanyahu, except Trump quite visibly said that the problem is Israel, not Iran, after Iran launched the missiles. Why? Because Trump knows There's no military option that works for him. If there were, he would have taken it. The guy has no scruples. Let's understand that. If it were simply a matter of military power and killing a lot of people and, quote, winning, he would do it. He can't do it.
He's getting a lot of his friends in the Republican Party and elsewhere, like the Wall Street Journal editorial page, the former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, Senator Lindsey Graham, they are egging him on to escalate militarily.
Of course. You know, if you believe you run the world, then every episode like this becomes a test of your ability to dominate the world. So all these people you mentioned believe that the United States has the right and the power and the use and the need to run the world. So whenever they see something soft, they just want more bombs. Lindsey Graham has never in my lifetime, and that's my lifetime, has never said, oh, why don't we back down a little bit? Let's find a way to talk. The man's a pig. Sorry to say it. I'll say it because he's gotten us and egged on more wars than anybody. So I view him as a complete ignoramus.
Competition there. You got John McCain, his former colleague, and of course Hillary Clinton, who John Mearsheimer says has never known a war she hasn't supported.
And she's my colleague at Columbia University now. Yes.
In fact, Hillary Clinton's at Columbia University now.
She runs a senior panel at our School of International Affairs.
Along with Victoria Nuland too, right?
She's the second, and Mike Pompeo is the third.
Right. Okay.
We've got
you're in good company, Jeff.
We've got the Department of Regime Change Operations that masquerades as a school of diplomacy. It's not good.
But just back to, given everything you've just said, Jeff, I'm sorry for cutting you off because we've only got 30 minutes, but I just want to push back here.
Yeah.
Why can't, given everything you've said, and Trump's instincts, his instincts for all his flaws, knows that there is no military solution, as you say, and he's obviously upset with Netanyahu. Why can't Trump just force Israel to accept a genuine ceasefire in Lebanon, especially if the global economy looks like it's going to tank? Jeff?
He can, if he were more capable. This is another point. People on the outside may view Trump as a thug, a little bit crazy and so forth, but they see him as strong, if unbalanced, if a thug and so forth. I see him as weak and incompetent. He's not able to carry a line. The reason is in politics, especially in Australian or American politics, if you're going to do something that is unusual, you actually have to be able to articulate it. You have to be able to communicate it to the public ultimately. You have to have the public on your side so that the likes of Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal and Mike Pompeo and so forth don't interfere with the public policy. In other words, a president or a prime minister on an issue like this needs to be able to lead. Trump can't lead. It's strange. People don't, I think on the outside, don't see this exactly. Trump's mode of communication is basically a true social post or some bizarre statement on Fox News, but almost never a presidential address which says, here's the American interest. I'm president of the United States, and I'm calling on the American people, explaining that we should back the following policies. A strong president could and would do that, would explain that Israel is egging on the United States in war, that we've had actually decades of war in this way. It's got to end. And as president of the United States, he's insisting. That's how I would do it, and I think it's how it's done by real leaders.
We've got some questions coming in for you, Jeff. Here's a couple. When do you expect an Israeli retaliation? Bearing in mind it is now 6:15 on Sunday afternoon in the US East Coast. And is America going to join Israeli retaliation? Jeff?
Of course, I'm not a fortune teller, but I expect retaliation soon, and I don't expect the United States to join. So Israel will do some bombing, do some damage. The United States, I expect, will not join because Trump has said, and I understand, I think, his position that Netanyahu shouldn't retaliate. If you look at all of the political actors in Israel, by the way, though I detest Netanyahu and his cronies, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who are all indicted by the International Criminal Court, the so-called opposition is just about as hawkish. And so they're all saying today, of course we retaliate. We have to prove we're sovereign. We have to demonstrate deterrence and so forth. You just heard this from Bennett, for example, who's running for prime minister, and he just said this in recent hours. So Israel's going to retaliate. And then the question is, will Trump say, well, that's a little dust up, now we go back, and he actually pushes harder, or will this enter into another sustained round of war? My belief is the United States, as incompetent as Trump is, will tamp this down. Actually, I don't think there will be. I don't think there will be an agreement, though, because the U.S. demands are not acceptable to the Iranian side.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any grounds for any complicated agreements on issues as complex and requiring actually technical capacity on the nuclear brief. And so what I believe should happen is the United States should say to Israel in no uncertain terms, stop the damn war, stop the killing, just stop it, and we're going home. That's what I think should happen.
I know, but if that doesn't happen and the Iran crisis is not resolved anytime soon, and you have said if that happens, it could trigger, quote, a major global economic crisis. But is that really true? Let me just push back gently here, Jeff, and run a comment or a thesis by you. It's Professor Daniel Yergin, whom I'm sure you know or know
I know well. Used to live down the hall from him.
Right, yeah, right. Was it at Yale University?
No, at Harvard.
At Harvard, right, okay.
Yeah.
Now, of course, he is one of the world's leading authorities on global energy markets.
Yes.
And he says that today's global energy system is far more resilient than many observers assume. This is what he wrote in the Wall Street Journal just last week. Despite the disruption in the Strait of Hormuz, this is the argument. The world is much less vulnerable to these shocks than during the oil crises of the 1970s, partly because the Western Hemisphere now produces more oil than the Middle East did before the crisis. How would you respond to that argument, Jeff?
I think that the decline of global production is significant. How big it is, of course, is a little hard for us to assess because some ships go through and so forth. But for oil, it's a decline of probably close to 20%, something like that, net, including the shipping that's going through, the rerouting of oil. That's enough to cause a very serious economic crisis.
Okay, well, it's not just Daniel Yergin. This is Christopher Smart. Now, he was a Treasury official in the Obama administration. He wrote in the New York Times
too. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll just summarize it for our viewers here. He says that the current disruption will accelerate oil and gas investment in the Western Hemisphere. He also notes that the new pipeline networks in Saudi Arabia and the UAE bypass traditional choke points. So he and Yergin might say to you, Jeff, that you might be overstating the global economic risks from the disruption in the Strait of Hormuz. Jeff?
Yeah, probably if you're Trump or Kushner, you're not going to feel a big hit. But if you depend on fertilizer for your food production, if you are putting $6 a gallon gasoline into your tank in the United States, if there are shortages of jet fuel in Asia, as there already are, if there are poor people in your region, in Africa and in Asia, these comments are just not right. They are right over 5 or 10 years. They're not right over the next 6 to 12 months. Of course, what's happened is the price of oil has gone from about $65 to $70 a barrel to about $100 a barrel. Now, it had reached about $115 a barrel, and then Trump said, we're going to have an agreement, and the shooting stopped to some extent, and the price came down. But we know that stocks, in other words, the buffers, are running down because people expect things to kind of go back to normal. If they don't go back to normal, there will really be shortages. I have no doubt. And the demand for oil is quite inelastic. The prices come down, not because of all these substitutes, but because stocks are running down, and the expectation is this will be short-lived. But if it proves not to be short-lived, then the price is going to rise significantly.
Yeah,
and
we've had
when it does, it's going to hurt a lot of people in the world.
Yeah, no. Well, John Mearsheimer, Stephen Walt, Bob Pape, all of whom you know, they've been past guests on this program. They make similar points. But again, Jürgen and Swift would say to you that oil prices have drifted lower recently, not because traders expect a swift rebound in straight shipping, just because of the rebalancing of supply and demand. And the winners, Jeff, will include the